You won't believe what I'm about to tell you. Hollywood, a place that promises fame, fortune, and a life beyond our wildest dreams, is hiding some of the darkest secrets you could ever imagine. Behind the glitz and glam, there's a dirty game being played, and it's not just about talent or hard work. Every day, we hear stories of people who came to Hollywood full of hope, only to be crushed by a system that uses them up and discards them when they're no longer useful. Now, let me take you back to one of the most shocking stories in recent years. You've heard of Taraji P. Henson, right? The powerhouse actress who took Hollywood by storm with her role in Empire. But what you might not know is the battle she had to fight just to get a seat at the table. It wasn't all red carpets and shiny awards. Taraji had to claw her way into an industry that was determined to keep her down. She's been vocal about how the industry tried to silence her and countless others, how you either conform to their rules or you starve. But what happened with her Empire co-stars, Bryshere Gray and Terrence Howard, takes this to a whole new level. This is where it gets interesting. Taraji has been speaking out more than ever, especially after everything that came to light about her co-stars. Bryshere Gray, once the bright young star of Empire, found himself at the center of a controversy that no one could have predicted. You won't believe how quickly things spiraled out of control for him. Bryshere had everything going for him, right? He was young, talented, and had a huge role in one of the most popular shows on TV. But just like so many others in Hollywood, the system chewed him up and spit him out when they were done with him. Now, here's the thing about Bryshere's story that's different from most. He didn't just fade into the background after Empire. No, things went downhill quickly, and it wasn't just about the lack of roles in Hollywood. It was much darker than that. Bryshere was blackballed from the industry, and that's when things took a wild turn. Unable to find work, he made the decision to create an OnlyFans account. At first, it seemed like a desperate move, but it was just the beginning. You see, it wasn't long before Bryshere started posting content that shocked the internet. Let me tell you, what he posted wasn't just provocative, it was disturbing. There was a time when people expected Bryshere to be the next big thing. After Empire, he should have been unstoppable, right? But instead, he started posting thirst traps, and then it got way worse. But hold on, this is where it gets crazy. It wasn't just about showing off his body for attention. He started doing things on camera that made people's jaws drop. The craziest part, Bryshere started sharing explicit videos and pictures, and not just any kind of content. He was engaging in activities that no one saw coming. Imagine watching someone who was once seen as a promising young star turn into something else entirely. It was as if the Bryshere everyone remembered from Empire had disappeared, replaced by a man who seemed to be spiraling out of control. And it didn't stop there. Bryshere took it to another level. He started collaborating with gay and trans content creators, and his posts became even more controversial. At first, it seemed like just a bizarre attempt to stay relevant, but it quickly turned into something much darker. He wasn't just making videos. He was engaging in explicit acts, and not just with women. This went far beyond what anyone expected. What makes this story different? It's not just about a man seeking attention. It's about the way Hollywood pushed him into a corner and turned him into something he never imagined he would become. Bryshere's story is a tragic one, but it's not just about his choices. It's about the system that failed him, just like so many others. You can't help but wonder, how did a talented young man who had the world at his feet end up in such a dark place? The answer might lie in his connections with some of Hollywood's most powerful players. Allegedly, Bryshere was mentored by none other than Diddy and Will Smith, but what started as mentorship, according to some, turned into manipulation. This is where it gets shocking. According to rumors, Bryshere's mother, Andrea, played a major role in connecting him with these Hollywood giants. Some say she sold him out, and others claim she was just doing what she thought was best for her son. But when Jaguar Wright, a well-known singer, spoke out, she painted a much darker picture. She claimed that Bryshere's mother essentially sold him to the highest bidder in Hollywood. She even went as far as to say that Diddy and Will Smith had used him in ways that no one should ever experience. The details she shared about Bryshere's time in Hollywood are chilling. Allegations of abuse and manipulation by the very people who were supposed to guide him. Now, it's time to talk about the real villain in Bryshere's story, Diddy. Yeah, I said it. Diddy's name has been buzzing in the air for years, but it's becoming impossible to ignore how deeply his actions have affected people like Bryshere. He wasn't just a mentor to Bryshere, he was a puppet master, pulling strings behind the scenes. And what makes this even more shocking is that Terrence Howard, another big name from Empire, recently came forward and shared his own disturbing experiences with Diddy. This is where it gets interesting. Terrence, who is no stranger to Hollywood's darker side, revealed the shocking details of how Diddy tried to manipulate him, just like he allegedly did with Bryshere. Terrence wasn't even asking for help from Diddy. He wasn't looking for a movie deal or a record contract. He had already made a name for himself in Hollywood. But that didn't stop Diddy from reaching out. He kept asking Terrence to come over to hang out, and that's when things started to feel off. You won't believe what happened next. Diddy, in his usual style, invited Terrence over to listen to some of his music and work together. But it quickly became clear that Diddy's intentions weren't exactly professional. According to Terrence, it was all a setup. Diddy was trying to get him involved in something that made him uncomfortable, something that had nothing to do with acting or music. Now, here's where it gets even crazier. Terrence wasn't just uncomfortable, he was creeped out. He recalled a time when Diddy said something to him that made him realize what was really going on. Diddy told him, "I want to take you shopping." And to anyone who's paying attention, you can tell that wasn't just a casual statement. It was a subtle hint, a message wrapped up in a seemingly innocent gesture. But for Terrence, it was a red flag. He knew exactly what Diddy meant, and it wasn't about clothes. What makes this story different? Terrence was strong enough to walk away. He knew that Hollywood had a way of breaking people, of turning them into something they weren't, and he wasn't going to let that happen to him. Terrence might have escaped that situation, but others weren't so lucky. You've probably heard the rumors about how Hollywood gets stars to compromise their values and principles just to stay relevant. The truth is, when you're climbing the ladder, you can't be too picky about how you get there. And this is how the system works. If you don't play along, you get left behind. Some people think it's worth it, but when you look at what it does to people like Bryshere, you start to realize that fame comes at a much higher cost than most of us are willing to pay. But Diddy's not the only one to blame in all of this. Hollywood as a whole has a long history of exploiting its stars, and it's not just the men who suffer. Women have been victims of this system for years, trading their bodies just to land a role. They might get that Oscar they've always dreamed of, but at what cost? They might have the fame, the money, but they lose something far more valuable, their soul. And you can see it in the way some of these stars carry themselves. They've lost everything, and they're just going through the motions. That's what makes Bryshere's story so heartbreaking. He didn't just lose his career, he lost himself. And what's even more tragic is that he's not the only one. There are countless others who've been used and discarded by the very system that promised to make their dreams come true. And the sad part is that it's all happening in plain sight. Bryshere's life is a reflection of how Hollywood treats its stars, especially those who are vulnerable and easily manipulated. Destiny took an unexpected turn for him, but the system was already rigged. And speaking of how the system works, let's take a closer look at the way Taraji P. Henson's story mirrors Bryshere's. She fought for every role she got, but her struggle didn't end there. She had to fight for fair pay too. Hollywood didn't just want her talent. They wanted to control her, to pay her less than she deserved while taking full advantage of everything she brought to the table. Taraji has been open about the fact that she had to deal with being underpaid and overworked. She said it herself. You either submit or you starve. And that's the brutal truth about Hollywood. You either play the game or you're out. But Taraji wasn't about to let them break her. She kept fighting, and now, with everything that's coming out about Diddy and the exploitation of stars like Bryshere, she's finding her voice more than ever. She's speaking up for the people who've been silenced by Hollywood's powerful elite. You won't believe how much the system has tried to bury these stories to keep them from coming to light. But now, with more people like Terrence and Taraji stepping forward, it's clear that things are starting to change. It's not just about what happens behind closed doors, it's about the way Hollywood sets up its stars for failure. Bryshere's story didn't start with the fame of Empire. It started when he was just a young boy with big dreams, trying to make it in an industry that's known for chewing up young talent and spitting it out. But here's the twist. Bryshere wasn't the only one who experienced this dark side of Hollywood. And what makes his story different from others is how it exposed the ugly truth about mentorship in the industry. At the beginning, Bryshere was mentored by two of Hollywood's biggest names, Diddy and Will Smith. They were supposed to be guiding him, helping him find his way in the industry, right? But as you can imagine, mentorship in Hollywood isn't always about helping someone reach their potential. Let me tell you, what started as mentorship quickly turned into something far more sinister. And this is how it works in Hollywood. When you're young and desperate for success, you'll do whatever it takes to fit in. Bryshere didn't know it at the time, but the people he trusted the most were using him, pulling him into a world of corruption, manipulation, and ultimately exploitation. According to sources close to Bryshere, his mother, Andrea, played a pivotal role in his path to Hollywood. What makes this story different? It's the way Andrea allegedly connected Bryshere with Diddy and Will Smith, thinking that she was giving him the best chance at success. But some say that instead of helping her son, she was essentially selling him to the highest bidder. The way the system works in Hollywood isn't about dreams coming true. It's about control. And if you're not careful, you can lose everything, including your dignity. Jaguar Wright, the singer who has been outspoken about the ugly side of the industry, didn't hold back when she spoke about Bryshere's rise and fall. She claimed that Bryshere's mother and his manager, Charlie Mack, played a key role in connecting him with Diddy and Will Smith. According to Jaguar, the whole thing was a setup. Bryshere was introduced to these powerful figures in Hollywood, not as a young man with dreams, but as a pawn in a much bigger game. Destiny took an unexpected turn for Bryshere, and it wasn't for the better. What happened next was something no one could have predicted. By the time Bryshere reached his peak with Empire, he was already in deep with people who didn't have his best interests at heart. The mentorship he thought he had was just a cover for something far darker. According to some, Bryshere's experiences weren't about growing as an artist. They were about being molded into something that Hollywood could control. But here's the shocking part. Bryshere's story wasn't just about him. It was about the way the system was designed to break people, to push them to the brink until they had nothing left. And that's exactly what happened. He lost his career, his self-respect, and eventually his identity. Now, let's talk about the aftermath. Bryshere didn't just disappear into obscurity. He spiraled into a much darker place. His time in Hollywood had broken him in ways that no one could have predicted. This is how the system works. When you're no longer useful, you're discarded. But Bryshere didn't give up without a fight. Unable to land any acting roles after Empire, he turned to OnlyFans, trying to make a living in a way that would shock anyone who remembered the young man he once was. It wasn't just about posting thirst traps. Bryshere started doing things on camera that no one should ever have to do. And what's even more disturbing is that this behavior didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the result of years of manipulation, exploitation, and the trauma that comes with being chewed up by an industry that doesn't care about the people it breaks along the way. Bryshere was just another casualty in a system that used him and then threw him away when he wasn't useful anymore. But as crazy as it sounds, Bryshere wasn't the only one who fell victim to this. There were others, people we don't even know about yet, whose stories haven't come to light. And what about the others who tried to speak out, like Taraji P. Henson? Taraji has been using her platform to expose the injustice she faced in Hollywood, calling attention to the way the system underpaid her, undervalued her, and tried to silence her at every turn. You won't believe how much she had to fight to get the recognition she deserved. But even in the face of all that, Taraji stood strong. She wasn't about to let Hollywood break her, and that's what makes her story so inspiring. In the end, Taraji's fight is a reflection of the fight that so many others have to endure in the industry. It's about the battle to be seen as more than just a commodity, to be valued for your talent instead of your willingness to conform to a broken system. Bryshere Gray's tragic downfall didn't just happen overnight. It wasn't just a result of bad decisions or a series of unfortunate events. It was the culmination of an entire system that set him up for failure from the very beginning. The industry he entered wasn't built to nurture his talent. It was built to take advantage of it. Let me tell you, Bryshere was used by some of the most powerful people in Hollywood. He was mentored by figures who should have been guiding him to success, but instead, they took what they needed and left him broken. But here's the thing that makes Bryshere's story resonate with so many others. He wasn't the only one. There are countless others like him, stars who started out with big dreams, only to be chewed up by the very system that promised them fame and fortune. The truth is, Hollywood is full of stories just like Bryshere's. Some of them we'll never hear about, and some we'll hear too late. And what makes this so heartbreaking is that these stories aren't just about fame lost. They're about lives shattered by an industry that demands so much from people but gives so little in return. This is where it gets interesting. There are still people out there, still fighting to change the narrative. Stars like Taraji P. Henson, Terrence Howard, and others are speaking up about the injustices they face, and their voices are getting louder. They're no longer willing to stay silent about what Hollywood does to its stars, and their bravery is starting to spark a conversation about how the system needs to change. But here's the shocking part. Even as more people come forward with their stories, Hollywood hasn't changed. It's still a machine that's built to break people down, to manipulate them into doing whatever it takes to stay on top. The industry is still full of the same players, the same manipulative forces that make stars feel like they have to sacrifice everything just to keep their place in the spotlight. And that's the real tragedy of Bryshere's story. It's not just about what happened to him. It's about the way Hollywood chews up and spits out talent and how it's been doing it for years. Now, you might be wondering, what happens next? Will Hollywood ever change? Will there ever be a time when people are valued for their talent, their hard work, and their humanity instead of just what they can provide to the system? The sad truth is that while there are some brave voices speaking out, the industry is still stuck in its old ways. And as much as we hope for change, it might take more than a few outspoken stars to shake things up. But that doesn't mean we should give up. Bryshere's story, painful as it is a reminder that we need to keep fighting for a better future. We need to support those who are brave enough to speak up, whether they're Hollywood stars or ordinary people, because their stories matter. Bryshere's fall from grace might seem like just another tragedy in a long line of Hollywood failures, but is also a call to action. If we want things to change, we have to be willing to face the truth about the system that's been in place for so long. As we finish up this wild ride through the broken side of Hollywood, one thing is crystal clear. Bryshere's story is just the beginning. It's a wake-up call for anyone who still believes in the magic of Hollywood without realizing the darkness behind the curtain. But it's also a story of resilience. Despite everything that happened to him, despite the way Hollywood treated him, Bryshere is still here, still fighting, and maybe, just maybe, the stories of those who were broken by the system will be the ones that finally bring about the change we need. So here's my question to you. Do you think Hollywood will ever be able to break its cycle of exploitation? Or are we just watching the same story repeat itself over and over again? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If this story opened your eyes or made you think about Hollywood in a whole new way, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content.